Welcome to CNET's Next Big Thing. I'm Brian Cooley.
And I'm Tim Stevens, and we're glad you're joining us for our 13th year of this important presentation.
Now, CES, as you know, is a show that's frequently, really always has centered on visual technologies. Go back to its roots in the late 60s. Really, it was a TV show, and it still is very TV dominant. We've had displays from too big to fit in your front door to almost too small to see on your wrist.
But now we're seeing a visual revolution that is different and important starting to take hold, and new ways of seeing through technology that are about much more than just the display.
Screens have become ubiquitous. They nearly upholster our lives, pairing us with information, entertainment, messages, and images almost everywhere we go and look. But have you noticed that much of that is actually displayed in the wrong place, peripheral to our gaze, separate from our attention, and never truly immersive? But virtual reality and augmented reality change all that. By filling our gaze with context, sometimes replacing our view with one that would be otherwise inaccessible, unlocking the unseen information that fills the physical world around us, or adding layers to our own experience. These two technologies, years in the offing, now stand ready for a world that demands constant visual support. They're poised to become the next major digital platform, the new reality. We're going. Now let's get started. First off, new to our Next Big Thing stage, and I'm really glad to welcome him into the NBT family, as you are a big part of as well, is our senior editor, Brian Tong, the inimitable Brian Tong. He'll be handling something new for us this time around. We're doing on-stage live demos of core technologies we're showing you this time.
We also want you to be part of the discussion. You can use our Twitter hashtag CNETNBT. We're going to be taking some of our favorite questions at the end of this conversation, so be a part of that and contribute there. Let's get started with the panel. Our panel includes Jens Christensen, CEO of Jaunt, a company creating tools for producing cinematic virtual reality.
Let's bring Jens on.
Welcome, Jens.
Thank you, Jens. Jerry Ellsworth is co-founder and chief hardware engineer at Technical Illusions. They're developing the Cast AR augmented reality platform.
Hey, Jerry.
Thank you.
Palmer Luckey is founder and CEO of Oculus VR, makers of the Oculus Rift. Hey, Palmer. Welcome.
And finally, Ray Velez joins us. He's the CTO of Razorfish, a very tech-forward ad agency within the Publicis Group.
Welcome.
Hi, Ray. Thanks for being with us.
So let's see the clouds of the first side of the new reality's coin, virtual reality. Take a look.
Virtual reality. It's basically about being somewhere else without leaving where you are. It combines some mix of 3D depth perception, nearly complete visual surround, and the ability for your gaze and movements to be transmitted to the media. VR is about entering a scene, not just looking at it. The goggles or headgear are what you notice first. Oculus Rift, Samsung Gear VR, Sony Morpheus, even Google Cardboard. They all replace your natural view with a synthetic or recorded one, while also sensing your motions to adjust your gaze and position in the scene. The content is not produced like any other. It's envisioned, captured, and edited with new skills and technologies that are still quite nascent. Games, of course, are the best-known use case for VR. They lend themselves to it very well, but the push is on now to grow telepresence and video content, like walking through a resort hotel before you book, right down to the slope of the beach or space of the restaurant. Imagine a similar experience for touring open homes, or checking out a car in the showroom from your living room, maybe even standing next to Paul McCartney on stage. It's not just the best seat in the house, it's every seat in the house, and everybody can enjoy it at once. We think the pieces are now finally in place for VR to have a real shot. The goggles are getting smaller and less expensive, while offering a more lifelike image and less nausea. And experimental new content is breaking out all over. And critically, marketers are intrigued by the possibilities. Still, users have to wear something on their face, go temporarily blind to the world around them, and stop multitasking. Producing VR content is orders of magnitude more difficult than the well-oiled world of flat high def. But when it's done well, it's magic. A claim that's been made by many technologies over the years, but seldom with the credibility of VR. So starting with virtual reality, I just want to lay out kind of the zones we have with our guests. And honestly, this is one of our, if not our best panel ever. And I'm saying that honestly because we have real innovators here, as opposed to experts, which are great, but we have real innovators on top of being experts. And this is really getting at the source, the well source, if you will, of where this is all coming from. So on your far right, Jens represents the virtual reality production world. Jerry represents augmented reality platform. You've got Palmer representing the virtual reality platform world. And then you've got Ray here from, yes, you've got Ray here from the voice of the global advertising agencies, which in my experience are extremely intrigued by what's going on to your left. So that's kind of where we're going in terms of who's doing what.
Absolutely. And let's start the discussion at Palmer. Right now we're seeing most of the applications in VR relating to gaming. I think a lot of people are very excited about that. Is that really going to continue to be the ultimate application for VR, or is that really just a kind of a Trojan horse to get these devices in people's homes?
I wouldn't call it a Trojan horse, but it's almost certainly not the end game for virtual reality. The reason we're seeing so much activity in games in VR is because the gaming industry is currently the only one that really has a large base of tools and talent to build immersive real-time 3D worlds. When people are working in marketing for VR, they're hiring the same people that make video games. They're not hiring marketers. They're not hiring, I don't know what else you would hire, but they're hiring game developers. And that's because virtual reality really at its core is an extension of gaming technology and how it's gone. But I don't think that's necessarily the end game. If you look at science fiction, where virtual reality has been a staple for decades, virtual reality doesn't culminate in societies of everyone just playing video games. It's this idea of digital parallel worlds, whether they're integrated with our own through augmented reality or existing completely alongside in a virtual reality. People able to communicate and be together and do things in a virtual space that's alongside the real world. And that's almost certainly not games. We don't spend the majority of our lives playing games. At least you guys probably don't spend the majority of your lives playing games. And while some people will, I don't think that's going to be the ultimate application.
I don't want to assume any understanding across the whole room. We have a large crowd here of many backgrounds. Let's start. I want to ask you, Jens, to give us a definition of virtual reality. Let's ask the stupid question.
Yeah, so basically it's a reality that's different from your own reality. So that's why it's virtual as opposed to the actual reality. And it's really an amazing thing, when people first put on a headset and also headphones, by the way. It's both visual and auditory. You try an Oculus or any of the other headsets, you really feel transported. That's really the key difference between VR and other type of media up till now, where, if you're watching TV or even, a movie, you're in your living room or you're, in the movie theater. But when you put on these headsets and headphones, you're suddenly, in a park or you're in the middle of a movie. And to us, that's really a quantum leap in terms of entertainment and really makes it a new medium. That's what we're excited about, enabling content creation for this new medium. And it's a great point. It started off in gaming, and gaming will always be part of it. But I think video and really cinematic VR broadens the appeal beyond essentially the gaming community.
Mm-hmm. We've got a demonstration now. Let's put some more meat on the bones. Brian Tong, our senior editor, joining us now with, and notice he'll be sitting down. We're going to get to why in just a minute. That's how immersive and realistic this is. So he's putting on Oculus Rift.
Oculus Rift, right? And we're going to see some cinematic interactive experiences. Some of which you may have seen, they're available now on the Google Cardboard platform as well. But Brian, we'll let you take it away with some Jaunt VR.
All right, here we are in Jaunt VR, and this is an example of here. We're in like this pool BMX biker. I can go 360, track them all the way. And when I first did this demo, I had headphones on, right? So this is an example where when you're taking this other world, you're also hearing the sound in 3D. So when I tilted my head this way, I could actually hear the audio. Oh, now Brian Cooley's gonna be jealous of this because I'm basically sitting on Paul McCartney's piano.
Damn you.
You wanna be here, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
So here you go again with this setup, taking you in a whole new world. This is the backstage area, right? I'm flipping around.
What you're seeing here on the stage, everybody, are the two binocular sources that feed his eyes. He doesn't see it that way, obviously. He sees the merged surround with stereoscopic depth.
Up high.
So not only is it immersive, it is full 3D for him.
I'm sure you're in there, uh-oh, did we see some pyrotechnics? Boom!
Now that's why he's sitting down, because this is so realistic. You
want me to
might
fall
lose
off
some
stage?
orientation of being on the stage.
Can you feel
There
the
we
heat,
go.
Brian?
But I mean, atmospheric, you're all up in it.
And this is
There,
what we,
there you are right there, Cooley, right?
You'll notice he gets what you call, what is known in the biz as Oculus mouth. Your mouth drops open.
Is that this one?
Yeah, that's the face. That's the face right there.
Yeah. So that's Oculus mouth.
There we go.
So pretty amazing, right?
Yeah, now here we are in the Shia. And if I look here, it's the Hobbit's door. And very serene and peaceful. You can see the depth here. I mean, I'm looking at this in 3D, right? So I can see all the different layers and levels. And is that Gandalf the Grey? Gandalf? Over here. That's how they say it in the movie, right?
It's that realistic, okay. All right, BT, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, so there is a sample of what it's like to see someone experience this amazing combination of VR production and VR, what do you call it, Palmer? Display, playback, immersion? What is the platform?
I guess VR hardware.
Okay. You're a true engineer, it's good. The virtual reality, I want to bring you in here, Ray. Virtual reality, you've seen every example of it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Where is it interesting? Because you heard the question from Tim: is gaming the start, the beginning, the middle? What phase of it is? Where does it have to go for advertising agencies to say, okay, now we're going to put big money behind this in our programs?
Yeah, so I think we're already, to some degree, we're already getting there. And I think to the point earlier, the technologists we have to hire now are gaming developers. We typically have a lot of web developers, mobile developers, but now we need folks who need to know this Unity platform, which is a gaming platform, and that creates that experience. A couple places where we see it being very exciting. Of course, one of the most exciting pieces of it is that captive audience, right? So somebody is there, they can't look around, you can't look to your neighbor, you're part of this audience, and now you can make sure that people are watching what you're showing to them and make it just so immersive that they block everything out. So you don't have banner blindness, you're not skipping a commercial, it's just incredibly immersive.
Not just lean forward, it's lean all the way forward.
Exactly.
That's all you're doing.
Right. And you know, these are real issues, right? Everybody's skipping commercials, people have banner blindness, you have to get past that. But one of the most exciting areas we also see is beyond the gaming space, which is over the last 4 years, our emerging experiences team has done a ton of work bringing digital to physical. And that's a really hard thing to do well, right? So I can't necessarily build the next generation car showroom or the next generation experience at the San Francisco airport, some of the big fun things we've done. And it's hard to iterate on it. It's hard to make a lot of changes. Once I get that wall up, I can't change the wall. But if I put that into an Oculus experience, I can then iterate on it, show it to my customers, show it to our team, show it to the designer, show it to the architect, say, well, what does it look like if I move the wall from here to here, right? So, and that's one of the fastest growing places we see in the industry, right? The web and mobile is very well known. We understand how to tackle those things. How do I bring that together with a real physical experience? And interestingly, virtual reality is going to help me build better physical experiences.
There's also a question of distribution. How do you get that experience into the hands of consumers and into the hands of clients?
Yeah.
What sort of progress are we seeing on that front?
Yeah, I think that's going to be really tough, right? Because these are devices built for developers at this point, right? And hopefully, where you start to make those partnerships with consoles and computer platforms, you'll start to see more people get these in their hands. But until that happens, it's difficult. And to the point in the video, the content's really hard to build. There's a lot of 360-degree cameras going to be here this year, more than last year, which is exciting. But to make the content, to make 3 minutes of content, I think in the Adweek article I read yesterday, it's $1 million, right? It's a really hard endeavor to build the content. So you have to make sure that you're all in, and you're going to get the exposure that you need to get. So hopefully the teams are going to help make that less expensive as the technology gets better.
Jens, ease of content production. What's the milestones that you're working toward there?
Well, it really is, it's not just about ease. There's a lot that's involved. We're building a camera that really makes it possible to capture 360, 3D video, the whole rendering pipeline to automate that whole process to go from all those video streams into really a compelling VR experience, the apps that run on various devices. I just wanted to add a little bit to what you were saying in terms of getting it out there to the consumer. We think mobile is just an amazing platform for VR. You know, there's Gear VR and there's also obviously Cardboard. And most people are already walking around with a $700 device screen in their pockets. Why not leverage that for VR? Now, it is true, there's certain kind of high-end games, for example, that probably can't run just on a mobile platform. But video, for example, plays really, really well on mobile. So we actually think that will be, over the next 2 years, really the way most people are going to experience VR. So yeah, in terms of content creation, they really are still, it's very early days. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered about best practices. You know, for example, if you're in a movie, should it be a first-person experience or should it be a third-person experience the way it is today? Lighting, how do you handle lighting? How do you handle set design? These are all questions that really need to be answered.
Jerry, I want to ask you about the role of VR in inspiring your work in AR. You're sort of the other side of the coin that we'll dive into more depth in a moment, but what of VR's attributes, if any, inspired or are inspiring your work in augmented reality? What do you really like about it?
I really like being able to synthesize your entire surrounding in VR, where you can create physics or you can create content that would be impossible to visualize any other way. You can't have anti-gravity in the real world, but you sure can in VR.
Yeah, so you can really write the experience you want from the ground up.
Yes.
Yeah. Which also, as we're talking about, creates a certain, a huge burden.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in that plane of view unless you create it.
Right, right. Well, I think the other thing on the adoption question is there's a risk that you might get a reaction like Google Glass, right? Which is, I don't know what you're seeing, right? So, but I think there's a way to solve that. I've been reading this book by David Rose, Enchanted Objects. Fantastic book, and he says it boils down to one thing. I don't know what you're looking at. Right? So is there some way when you think about technologies like the Dodo case, Google Cardboard, that's what, $25 I think it was. I bought a couple a couple weeks ago. So getting people to try this out, it's not hard, but it's still very isolating. I'm not going to go walk down the street with it. And even if I walk into the office with my Google Glass, I think people look at me like I'm a jerk, right? And it's because there's this adversarial thing that happens is like, what are you looking at, right? I don't like you because you're looking at something I don't know you're looking at. Right? I'm not in on this, right? So there's got to be a way to help share this, right? And obviously the technology's there, right? It's got to be much more shareable to get it out of just the showroom technology, right?
Right. You can't see what I'm looking at.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, interesting.
And you almost got run over by a car, right? So it's that same thing, right? Like you have to solve that.
You'd love to see what I'm looking at.
It's a black screen, by the way.
Does it have to do with kidney stones? Or?
No, it's the picture. It's that one.
So Palmer, what's your reaction to this sort of disconnect, social disconnect that VR kind of brings with it?
Well, I think it's solvable. You guys can solve that.
I think it's solvable, but it's also one of those things that changes with technology and society. And applying technology as it exists as a development, mostly development kits and these early adopter devices to how we think people are going to interact, I think it's really premature. It'd be like if you were trying to predict telephones, for example, and you said, well, let's go back to the 1800s, and you say, well, you're telling me everyone's gonna have, everyone's gonna be able to just call people when they're at other people's homes. Right. What are you gonna do? You're gonna have a telephone room? You're just gonna put like 20 telephones all in a room? That's stupid. Yeah. Who's gonna do that? They're not even able to talk to each other. They're just all gonna be in the room on the phones. Right. That's not what happened. We all ended up with our own little interactive devices that we carry through our lives. Right. And I think that VR is gonna be a lot the same way. Seeing it as an isolating experience is, I think, a limitation of existing technology and existing platforms, not a core problem with it. I mean, if anything, it's something that you can augment the real world with and make people more connected. And people are going to get used to it, just like they've gotten used to you can't see what's on my screen.
Yeah, it's still annoyed. But so do you think? Right? I love the founder of.
Well, I'm younger than you too.
Yeah, you are a little younger, right? Different generation. Like when you.
How old were you when you started working on Oculus Rift?
16 about.
Yeah.
How many people are bothered by not seeing what's on other people's phones? Who's not bothered? All right, look, see all the 20-somethings?
A lot of folks aren't sure.
Okay. So Palmer, we've talked about gaming for VR, of course. We've talked about advertising in VR. We've talked about cinematic VR. Tell me about Facebook and VR. Where does social networking tie into this?
Like I said, it's way too early to say. It's one of those things where trying to predict where things are going to go based on the hardware as it exists today is tough. I mean, like the Rift as it exists today, or even cardboard being a lot cheaper, there's no obvious way they integrate into a social network as we use them and as we understand them today. Just throwing a bunch of pictures into a space, that's not interesting. Just having a news feed that's as larger than life, that's not interesting either. It's going to be the new experiences that make virtual reality fascinating. So I don't even know if I could hazard much of a guess, but if I would say that it wouldn't necessarily be Facebook, the social network, it would be some of the key concepts. People are narcissists, and they like to share the best parts of their lives with other people, and they like other people to see the incredible lives that they want people to think they live. And that's probably going to carry over to virtual reality. I mean, if you can have, if I can share a family gathering with all of the other extended family that couldn't make it, and allow them to feel like they're actually there, that's a powerful thing, especially for people who aren't there not by choice, but because they're limited. People who live in nursing homes who don't have access to
and I don't think
the real world.
Anybody would forgive me if I didn't ask you, when are we going to get the consumer edition of Oculus Rift?
We don't have anything to announce at this time.
I tried.
Okay, look.
Sorry.
Think of it this way. It's people see it as this thing where VR's taking a really long time to come around. They're like, oh, people have been talking about it for years, but really this whole resurgence in VR has only been around a couple of years. Oculus hasn't even been around for 3 years as a company. Like, we've got many months to go, but we're like 2.5 years old, and we've already shipped 2 products of our own and helped ship Samsung a product of their own. That's better than an annual release cycle. People are really impatient about things they want, but it's really hard to go
because we want it really bad. That's why.
Now, before we turn the corner to augmented reality, I want to get one more question here with Jens. We're talking so much about pre-produced content, but you've got a strategy to live, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think once you can do live, that's going to increase the attractiveness of this technology even a step further. And especially if you can share experiences. I really think that's where we're going to go with social, is you'll have shared experiences with your friends in VR. So your friend over in Baltimore, you can attend the same football game with him and sit on the 50-yard line together. I think that would be an awesome social experience where you're watching the same VR content, and it being sports, having it be live would be very important. So it really it's really a technical problem at this point. It's about really speeding up this whole automated pipeline in terms of taking the video and audio content and creating this immersive experience in real time. We're not quite there yet, but there's no fundamental reason we can't get there.
All right, virtual reality is just half the story. Let's turn now to augmented reality. We talked a little bit about glass. There have been some not great starts to the technology, but there have been some really great efforts lately. Tablets and much more advanced wearable devices. So let's check it out. Google Glass is the poster child for this revolution. High-tech headgear that made quite a splash when it was introduced. Glass, released too early to too few at too high a cost, failed to ignite a revolution. But don't worry, that revolution is coming. Imagine a pair of AR glasses of the future. Not like Google Glass, but something far more powerful. Instant notifications without reaching for your smartphone would be easy, of course. Useful on a cold day like today, and contextual overlays over the real world would let you tap into the power of the hive mind. Of course, you could always use a little help getting somewhere that you need to be. But that's all simple stuff. Just tiny hints of the promise of much, much more. Augmented reality won't just free us from staring at our smartphones, it stands poised to drag the digital world into the real, enabling seamless interaction with both. With Cast AR, you can play digital games with your friends, merging the social aspects of tabletop gaming with the power of video gaming. With the Recon Jet, you can track your fitness and run races against your friends, even if they're in another country. A Google-funded startup called Magic Leap promises to create virtual images indistinguishable from real objects. But there's so much more to come. Car windscreens that let you see through buildings. Medical devices that allow doctors to see through skin. And yes, intelligent glasses that will tell you everything you need to know about everything there is to know. There's a lot of work ahead, but the potential for our new augmented future is absolutely huge. Those were just safety glasses, by the way. Unfortunately, I don't have access to anything that I'm not at liberty to talk about. So, Jerry, let's talk about AR. Again, I think we're seeing gaming as being a pretty interesting application for AR. Do you see that as something that will help to get people used to the technology?
Certainly. Gamers are early adopters. They'll endure a lot more pain early on than the general public. And then also, the same reasons we talked about for VR. We have to create this 3D content, and we have to integrate it into some kind of system, and game engines are perfect for presenting augmented reality content.
Now, your background is in gaming. How important was that?
Well, kind of, yeah.
How important was that to come into, to bring those attributes, those skills? First of all, give us the definition of augmented reality. I'm going to go bookend with Jens' virtual reality. Define augmented reality, especially compare and contrast.
Well, if VR is confusing for people, AR is probably 10 times more confusing because there's so many attempts at AR out there. Some people use tablets and they use the front-facing camera and they try to figure out what's going on in the world and insert synthetic features and creatures and stuff onto the real world. Some people think that the Google Glass was an AR device, which it was probably more of an information device to get your tweets and stuff like that. And then, like your safety glasses there, that's what we see in movies all the time. It's just some thin pair of glasses that you can wear, and you can just do all these magical things, like overlay people's names, over their head, or have interactive games on the table.
All right, well, let's take a look at one implementation of augmented reality, Cast AR, which is Jerry's company. So, Brian, take it away, my friend.
Yeah, BT's back here. Now, Jerry, can you narrate the setup here? We have one of our cameras, Celso's on a camera there, showing the audience the setup that's down here in front of the stage. Generally, Brian is wearing the glasses, he has a controller, there's a table, and there's some other hardware around it. So, Jerry, tell us how this all works.
Okay, so on the brim of the glasses, there's 2 HD projectors, one for each eye, and it projects images down to the surface. And the surface is a special surface that bounces all the light back. So the computer can send stereoscopic images down that look like they're floating on the table, little game characters, or in this case, it's a marble type game that it's similar to Marble Madness. You can play with your friends, you can stand around the table, you can look at different perspectives, but you're all sharing the same virtual space.
Now we're moving in on in this case, we're using a smartphone to show you what BT is seeing through his glasses. This gets to be a lot of recursive layers here. BT, what's it like? Save me.
Yeah, well, what we have here is basically, you can see this, she's playing as if it's a different perspective from what I see. So what makes this unique also is, not only can I look and see all of you perfectly clearly, there's nothing obstructing my eyes, I can see your lovely faces. When I look down on the table at this surface, I can actually see the marble game. And then as I move around it and change my perspective, you will still be able to see that game on this surface. So it's really not limiting you to being in that single world. You're being able to interact with your friends, with your peers. You can egg them on. If Star Wars Holo Chess was here today, I would love this thing, right? We'd have it right here. You could be egging on your friends. So it really gives you an example of being still able to interact with others, still keep that social element while playing the game at the same time.
So you can imagine playing Diablo with your friends, for example, right on a massive tabletop in front of you. Any kind of top-down dungeon crawler would be absolutely perfect for this kind of thing. Everyone has their own perspective, and you can get up and move around, and you look around corners even, which is pretty cool. And you're also working on some accessories too, right? Some other controllers and wands.
Correct. For augmented reality, you need to be able to get input, but it's in 3D space. So we're developing a wand that you can reach out and touch characters. You can pick them up with the wand, move them through 3D space, drop them down. Or for Star Wars chess, you select your characters and move them around and have your virtual battles.
And they're pretty styling glasses there, BT.
Hey, I make them look good. Come on, don't be jealous.
You make anything look good.
So folks, what you're seeing here, just to be clear, when you see that rectangular shape there, that's the entire top of the table. When he looks at it, he sees the marble game. When you look at it, you don't. The glasses add the augmentation to it. You just see a great table. And yet it's a real table. You both see the real table. So it's an interesting blend. As Jerry says, it is actually in some ways more difficult to explain than VR, some of its permutations. Now, Ray,
and extensions to this. We're working on technology that allows you to render graphics around real-world objects. So that's mixing reality and the virtual synthetic objects. So for instance, you could put down your dragon character, and he could shoot virtual fire out at your opponents across the table. You can see the reaction on their face when you burn them.
And you also mentioned some people are thinking about doing this for really large virtual displays, for example, or race simulators, flying simulators, that kind of thing. Because ultimately, you just need a lot of that material that's sitting on top of the table.
Yeah, wherever the material is becomes an HD display.
And that's just an inexpensive material, right? That's not
Yeah,
some elaborate
it's a very
display.
common material that's used for reflective clothing. So it's a few dollars per square meter, and you have
It's that Scotch reflective tape, basically,
pretty
right?
much. Yeah.
Okay. Now, BT, thank you. Great stuff. Thanks for showing us that. Ray, what's your take on AR versus you and the industry's look at VR?
Yeah, I think we see the two coming together, and you saw this with I always remember the first iPad app that allowed me to walk in my backyard and look at the stars. And so that's where we're starting to see this coming together of augmented reality, virtual reality, and pulling in a fantasy world almost. So we built this site. You can go to halostarscope.com, and if you hold up your phone, and it's all right within the browser, and you're looking at the sky, you're seeing the Halo Starscope in the sky that you're looking at. So it's kind of this mix of taking and that's why it's hard to nail it down, is, you know, it's a little bit of virtual reality, augmented reality, and the physical world. So we see it coming together to, you know, just again, to create that immersive experience that grabs somebody's attention, and you don't want to look away.
When it comes to more traditional forms of marketing, it seems like it'd be a more logical fit in augmented reality than in virtual reality, right? In terms of banner ads and that kind of thing, and things that maybe people aren't so fond of.
Yeah, I mean, there is the fear of something like the minority, like we always talk about, the Minority Report type of thing, where you're looking and all these crazy things are obstructing your view. And I don't think that's where people want to go. But when you start to bring together AR with beacon technology and things like that, you can see that potential, right? The beacon can tell me where I am. I hold up my phone, and then all of a sudden, the retail display I'm looking at shows me a promotion, right? So there are things like that that have gained some traction, but are still early on. I think you're seeing a lot of the intersection around virtual, augmented beacons, Internet of Things type of technologies to just really create whole new experiences.
Jerry, what is the main hurdle in getting people to understand AR? I'm sure you've introduced it to friends and family and colleagues 1,000 times. What's the biggest hurdle in getting them to get it?
Well, it's very difficult to record and show in 2D form. You've got to get people in the glasses, let them stand up, move around the table, and actually see it. Until you do that, you know, no words can describe it. And getting units out there and actually getting hardware that people can work with, you know, it's challenging because so few people in the whole world have ever seen this kind of see-through AR experience.
I almost think it's a little easier for the VR camps to tell their story because it's a little simpler in a sense. The technology's not, but the outcome is like, look, you're going to see something else, and you're going to go somewhere else. That's pretty simple, powerful, but simple. I mean, you can take it all the way back to the old ViewMaster reels. It's not virtual reality, but it is replacing your reality, and so we've all got some sort of organic, almost prehistoric understanding of that. But the VR or the AR stuff it's subtle in a lot of layers.
And it's a difficult problem as well because the technology isn't quite there for a full walk around AR yet, where we can understand the environment and understand how, you know, this object's supposed to interact with our virtual object. But it's very promising going forward. It's going to be the most relatable type of display because you're still going to be able to see your friends. You're not going to be isolated. You know, it's going to be blending these elements into your environment.
That's a question I want to bring back to our two VR innovators here, Jens and Palmer. The fact that your technology more or less kind of keeps me away from multitasking, keeps me away from casual glances. It focuses me, but that can also be something of a burden or of a cost to pay to engage in the experience. Do you think that's limiting of a number of people who will be interested in using VR?
I don't personally think it's limiting. I actually, some of my favorite videos that we have, or experiences as we call them, are really the ones where you don't get a lot of stimulation. It's not really the loud concert or the boxing match. It's more the serene kind of, you're on a mountaintop and you're looking around and it's beautiful. And what's happening there is, you know, you have your busy day, you're at the office, and you put on the goggles, and now suddenly you're, you know, out in nature, it's peaceful. You take a 10-minute break from your busy day. And that couldn't happen if you didn't have that isolated, you know, feeling. So I think it works both ways. I think it can be limiting, but it can also enhance the experience.
We lump these two technologies together in this topic. VR and AR, we call them the new realities. Do you, in the business, think that you have a common mission and cause? You can evangelize each other, or are you two different tracks?
Oh, definitely. I think they're just, you know, two sides of the same coin, really. And going forward, who knows what these technologies are really going to be? I mean, I'm hoping we'll see, you know, thin glasses that you press a button and they go dark, and now you're in VR, or you do something else and now you see a little. Goblin or something in front of you. I mean, that kind of technology I think would be very appealing. It's very early days.
Palmer, is that something that you're personally excited about, having full field augmented reality, or do you think VR is the future?
Well, I mean, I'm excited about it. I think it's a much harder problem to solve, especially when it's one thing to display some information, you know, like Google Glass. It's another to display information on a projector screen in the real world. It's another to actually be able to project it on anything and understand the real world. And that's very difficult. I think the first step is making a device that can make you believe that you're in a different place. If you can simulate a virtual environment, there's nothing really stopping you from capturing the real world and piping it in real time. It's all in the same stack of technology. I'm more interested in tackling the problem from the side of getting VR perfect and then figuring out how to bring the real world into that, rather than trying to continuously add things onto the real world. But that's just my personal perspective. I'm more interested in virtual reality in the near term than augmented reality, but at the end of the day, they're going to end up being the exact same thing. It's going to be the same hardware, it's going to be the same software, it's most likely going to be the same kind of digital spaces that we exist in.
And
seamlessly between the real and virtual worlds.
Do you think that we have a hurdle to overcome to kind of get beyond the negative perception that a lot of people have for Google Glass? And if so, how can companies who are making augmented reality products really market them effectively?
Well, I do agree that I think you're going to see a generational gap, like folks where it doesn't bother them. But I think the hurdle will come with adoption, right? So what's interesting is when we talk about the convergence of VR and AR, you think about a mobile device, and everybody's got that mobile device in their pockets, and so at least that gets you the scale you need to really do things that matter, right? You know, there's a lot of great, interesting cases out there, but that's because a travel agency went out and bought a bunch of Oculus and put it in their office, and now you could look at British Columbia, right? So that gets you there, but you need greater scale to get everyone else building on it, and that's where the mobile devices come together, and then that's where you're going to start to see people sharing, right? They're going to want to have a shared experience, or they're going to want to sit back on their couch and figure out a way to meditate and relax, right? So, but I think that sharing aspect will get over the hurdle, and once you start to see, more people outside of the bubble areas using these devices, then you'll start to get, people will get comfortable with it.
It's a bit
but
of a chicken
it feels like there's got to be some sort of notification, though, right? Like, hey, I'm looking at naked pictures of you on the internet, right? Like something that tells the other person that.
That's what was on his phone. That's what makes me nervous. Yeah.
It's a bit of a chicken and egg also, perceptually. Like Google Glass did a really good job of making it look sleek and stylish, but instead they punted on features that would have made it more functional for us as a computational device.
Yeah.
It was mono, you couldn't do 3D graphics, you couldn't track the world. So it's going to be this push and pull, trying to find something that the general public will accept, the dork factor of it now, as the technology shrinks and they can become super sleek and stylish.
But I think the sharing aspect, that'll get past the dorky effect. So if I walk in and my mom has one on and I have one on, I'm like, hey, look at this video of the kids or whatever it is, then my mom will love it. Right?
It's more than just sharing. I think the key is that it's easy for people to hate things until they want to use it.
Right.
And all the time on the computer, the damned computer. But then all of a sudden when it became easy for people to look up recipes and to watch the shows they like and to communicate with their families, all of a sudden you have tons and tons of older people using Skype and using tablets and using computers because it became accessible to them. It's not just sharing, it's just that there has to be something for them to be interested in, or they're not going to get it. And they're not going to say, oh, well, I understand how it's useful for them, but it's not useful for me. It's not my thing. Most people will just say, no, it's stupid because I don't want to use it.
Yeah.
Well, one of the key traits you'll find in the history of technology entrepreneurship is that people like we have here today, we're dissatisfied with the status quo. You go all the way back to Ferruccio Lamborghini started making cars instead of tractors because he thought Ferraris were too slow. Palmer, you're telling us you started making VR headgear because what was out there, even at a high level, wasn't any good. Jerry, what drove you into AR?
Well, I was working in an R&D lab at a video game company, and we were looking at where future tech was going. We looked at tablets, where are you going to make them smaller or bigger? Plasma TVs, we can add a few more pixels, but there's just there was nowhere else to go except for AR. You know, whether it's going to be 2 years from now or a decade from now, it's coming, and that's the main direction of technology these days.
So a sense of inevitability surrounds it in your mind.
A little bit of housekeeping. I want to let people know we have microphones in the middle and the back of the room. We're going to be starting to take questions soon. So if you have any questions for us, please feel free to
It's really
head
dark,
that away.
so if you can find that mic,
And please,
that's great. There's two of them, yeah. About midway and then way far back down the center aisle here is where you'll find Mike. Thank you, guys. There we go.
And if you would rather ask us via Twitter, we can take that too. CNET NBT is the hashtag. We'll take some of our favorites.
We've got a lot of folks with questions. Let's go right to it at the
We're gonna
front
do it?
mic here, sir, in the black hat there.
Yes. Hi, my name is Matthew Turndrup. I'm a freelance programmer and also freelance journalist. So my question to, I guess, the panel, I would like to know mostly Palmer's thoughts on this. But what are your thoughts on an open source virtual reality headset?
Just to repeat for the room, thoughts on an open source VR headset.
Our first development kit, DK1, was open sourced in September. All of the hardware is available, all of the schematics are available, and all the component lists are available. All of the tooling is available for anyone to 3D print or injection mold. It is a good thing. It is a good thing to share knowledge that has been discovered so that other people can build on it and improve it. It's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Yeah, bravo.
There it is, right?
I got a question online, Ray. I think this one's probably good for you. What types of data are these new technologies providing for marketers and developers as well?
Well, I think if you look at it from a really immersive experience, you're going to get that specific person, where they are, what they're doing, are they walking? A lot of what I think you'll get from mobile today, right? Like one of the really powerful things about wearables and mobile is I know you're walking, I know it's raining, I know it just started snowing, I know all of this about you, and I think this is going to be an extension of that. And then, of course, you'll get the behaviors. You know, I really love that Coldplay concert, or I love to play Halo, or I love both, right? So those will provide greater data.
Or no, like my favorite example is I know that it's Tuesday.
Right.
I know I love Rubio's. It's Rubio's Fish Taco Tuesday.
Right.
Palmer, don't forget to stop at Rubio's.
Let's go to the far microphone. I believe a gentleman in a dark jacket and a red tie. I think I have that right. Give us your name and where you're coming from, so to speak, and what your question is.
Sure. Hi, I'm Dr. Shane Pace. I'm a media psychologist studying cognitive psychology and new technologies. I wanted to know with VR, is anybody currently working on a system that adds real-time scanning cameras so that you can see your hands and your legs so you don't lose that presence of self?
There's something similar to that in the Intel booth. As a matter of fact, they have cameras that are detecting your hands, and you can see that. I haven't seen, you know better than I haven't seen anything that's full body at this point.
Oh no, I used it earlier, and I was using my whole body to steer a spaceship.
Right.
Oh man, yeah, it was something else. I've never experienced anything like that.
Sounds pretty trippy. All right, there you go.
Oh, but to answer the question, yes.
Yes.
Gentleman in the front mic here in the gray shirt. What's your name? Who are you with?
Hi there, I'm Greg Panos. I'm a VR pioneer from the 90s. The question I have is, now that VR is really taking off because everything has gotten inexpensive, what are the bandwidth and delivery challenges for experiences given throttling, data caps, and all the sort of attitude of scarcity as far as the carriers are concerned? A lot of VR looks like it's going to be mobile, and a lot of it are going to have substantial download packages, and this could be an impediment. Are there any, what are your thoughts on how to condition data or how to properly deliver it in a constrained environment, or how to expand the environment?
It's interesting. I worked at a chip company where we did video compression, and we were helping define a standard for 3D delivery of content. I thought it was kind of crazy in the early 2000s. There's actually some specs out there that already have compression that can work across both eyes. Essentially, when you do 3D content, you're creating twice the bandwidth to deliver to both eyes. But you know, perhaps it won't be as bad as we think delivering it. Although there is an arms race.
No, it's as bad as you think, because it's not just 3D, it's 360 degrees. And so you don't have this little tiny frame that you need to maintain resolution, and you need to maintain resolution in this massive frame. Gear VR has some of these issues where to have a high resolution video that you can play back on the device that is a reasonable resolution, you have multi-gigabyte files per minute of video and its full playback capability. And you're right, existing network transmission I guess infrastructure and I guess pricing structures are not built in a way that's very friendly to these. It's going to be interesting to see how, how this works in the future, because existing internet infrastructure and pricing is built around content that we already know and understand, things like Netflix, things like streaming 2D video, not for streaming high resolution 360-degree video. It's going to be interesting to see if the regulatory environment changes in a way that makes it economically unfeasible for carriers to prioritize the delivery of certain kinds of data that truly demand that kind of prioritization. VR really.
Well, perhaps the
VR is really hard to do.
Perhaps
over
we're going to see
real-time
more
transmission.
content which is actually model-based inside
We may
game
do that,
engines.
and that's the thing. We could get around this entirely because everything's going to be rendered on board in the long run. But like for what you're doing, I mean, you're screwed if you can't transmit live 360-degree high-resolution video.
Oh, we'll be able to do that.
Oh, I know you'll be able to do
Don't worry
it,
about
but that's why we can't necessarily move
Note
to
to
a
Twitter,
world.
John's not screwed.
I mean, that's one of the reasons we're not going to move to an entirely model-based, locally rendered infrastructure anytime soon.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work going on in compression. I mean, for example, your point of 3D, there's a ton of overlap between obviously what you see on your left and right eye, tons of opportunities. And, the users aren't necessarily looking at the full 360 video at any given time, and that's something else you can leverage. So there are many things that can be done on the compression front. But over time, there is going to be this race of amount of bits you want to push through the pipes and just how big those pipes are. There's no question about that. And so today, when you download our app, Paul McCartney, and we sense that you're not on Wi-Fi, we do ask you, are you sure you really want to download this on your data plan?
What's the file size on that?
It's actually not, it's in the hundreds of megabytes.
Per?
The full
per
file
minute?
size,
Okay.
yeah. And that's partly because the screen resolution today is not up to par to what we're recording. We're actually constantly downsampling. That's going to change as well, right? You're going to get higher screen resolution, et cetera. But I do think that bandwidth is going to keep up with what we need.
Okay, thanks for your question. Let's go to
Great,
our
thanks.
next question, the gentleman there in the light blue shirt. Give us your name and who you're with.
Thank you. My name is Ben Konak. I'm from Sacramento. It's M2 Teach. And my question refers to the interactive of education of getting these tool sets or tools into the classroom and to expand the learning experience in math to English to help disabled or challenged kids to learn different ways.
Okay.
Anybody want to take
Everybody's
that?
gonna look at you.
It's cost. Reducing the cost will accelerate that for sure.
Right. Reducing the cost on what we have technology-wise, but like what you're saying is you're asking partly how it can be done. I think that's implying that there is value in doing it, and I think you're absolutely right. Because right now we've decided in the traditional education environment that sending people out of the classroom and on field trips is a worthwhile thing. Why? Because we all know that being in a classroom, looking at things in a book or on a chalkboard is not the best way to learn. Maybe it is for some people, it isn't for the majority, and there's things you can't learn that way. If that's the case, you want to send kids out so they can experience things in the real world, whether it be looking at dinosaurs at a science museum, looking at ruins in ancient Rome. Most school kids aren't getting to go there, but maybe you're in college and you're on some sweet exchange tour on your private school. But whatever it is, we're in this world where that kind of education is only available to a limited subset of people. I was just in Washington, D.C., and I was thinking, oh my God, all these public schools, they have this entire Smithsonian museum network where they all get to see things nobody else in the entire country gets to see. That leads to a huge disparity. Virtual reality isn't necessarily just a tool to improve education. It's a tool to give everybody access to the same education, to the same kind of information, and give people access to ways to learn that don't exist in traditional classroom settings, so that anybody can look at those dinosaur bones, anybody can go look at those ruins, and not just in the United States public school system, but around the entire world. People who right now can't even afford things like computers and traditional infrastructure for just email and stuff. I think that virtual reality is going to come down and down and down in price eventually. Just look at phones a few years ago. You have these phones. Does anyone remember the dream of the $99 computer and how that was going to change the world? That's stupid. We have like $40 tablets now. It's a dream that just blew past us because technology gets so cheap so fast. And a cutting edge phone 5 years ago is something I can buy for $50 unsubsidized off contract right now. VR is going to be the same way. The headsets today that are $500 are going to be dirt cheap. They're going to be $50. They're going to be $30 because they're not really required to be all that expensive.
The hardware path is it's a given. Jerry, I want to ask you about this educational question. Once this solves, this hardware and bandwidth we've been talking about, how about the authoring question? How do we bring that on the same curve where authoring gets as easy as the hardware got cheap and the bandwidth got plentiful?
Well, being able to actually work in 3D space and being able to use input devices that let you move seamlessly through that will allow you to author things much easier than in trying to do it on a 2D display. We just did a demo recently where we showed that you could do 3D models on the computer screen, then look over to your 3D printer and see what was going to be printed in there. It gave you a much better idea of what was going to actually come out by being able to look around at different angles inside the printer.
Another question from online. When will user-generated video be a factor in VR, which I think is interesting? Jens, can you give us an idea of what it would take to take, the hardware that you guys are using to create this content?
Yeah.
What would it take to turn that into something that a consumer could purchase, and how far away are we away?
Well, it really depends on the level of quality you're satisfied with, right? So, we think it's very important to keep the quality as high as possible. Because people are going to have their first experiences with VR and cinematic VR, and we want it to be a great experience. And if you go too quickly down to the consumer level, you're going to end up with things like, flat 2D, which is much less immersive than a full 3D 360 experiences. You're going to have things where you just have a cylinder instead of a full sphere, et cetera. And I think that can really damage the whole field, frankly. So we'd like to come at it sort of from the top down with a great experience that gets less and less expensive over time. Right now, these are expensive cameras. They're not even at the prosumer level. They're really, for professionals. But like any sort of compelling technology, we think the price point is going to come down fairly quickly.
All right. The user interaction has to be, friction-free, and that's what we haven't achieved yet. How am I going to send my father to Target to buy this device and put it on and play his fantasy football game? It's going to take a lot of integration and understanding how user interfaces should be and how out-of-box experiences should be.
Someone's going to have to take it upon themselves to make a really easy-to-use capture device that people are going to be able to use.
Yeah.
I'll bet you we'll see it here at CES at some point in the future.
We'll do it in a year and see where this has all come.
All right, I want to thank our entire panel, Jens Christensen from Jaunt, Jerry Ellsworth from Technical Illusions, Palmer Luckey from Oculus, and Ray Velez from Razorfish. Thank you all.
Let's have a hand for our panel.
Yeah.